Vietnam is one of the most fascinating countries in Southeast Asia. It contains a large number of cultural treasures, as well as much remarkable scenery. Due to its exceptional buildings of both past and present, as well as its magnificent natural scenery, Vietnam surprises everyone that travels to this region of Asia. Vietnam's former capital of Thang Long means rising dragon, and it's now known as Hanoi. Like all cities in Southeast Asia, Hanoi has an increasing traffic problem. But to compensate for this, it also contains several parks. Early in the morning, a number of Tai Chi enthusiasts are to be found within a park that surrounds the Hoan Kiem Lake in the center of the city. The picturesque lake and park are the green lungs of Hanoi and are a relaxing contrast to the lively atmosphere of the city and its 3 million inhabitants. In the 1,000-year history of Hanoi, which since the 7th century has been the capital of Tonkin, the most northerly region of Vietnam, there are many beautiful buildings such as the Temple of Literature, Van Mieu. The Temple of Literature was originally built for the adoration of the famous Chinese philosopher Confucius. This location consists of several beautiful gates and courtyards. To honor the Buddhist advisor of Emperor Li Tai-to, the single pillar and single column pagoda of Jumoko were built. In 1954, the pagoda was destroyed by the country's French colonial rulers. The 1950s also marked the end of French occupation. But life in Vietnam did not return to normal when the French left, as the country was divided into two independent nations. In addition to Confucianism and Buddhism, Taoism is another important religious and philosophical doctrine for the people of Hanoi. The Big Khao Temple is one of the most impressive examples of Taoist architecture. According to legend, Hanoi's oldest pagoda was built in the 6th century AD, during the rule of Li Nam Di. But the buildings and 14 steles that can be seen today were built much later. Despite its colorful neon advertising signs, the capital has remained relatively unspoiled. A nightly attraction is the traditional water puppet performance, an art form that has been popular for 1,000 years and is unique to Vietnam. In the center of Hanoi is the Old Town, a tangled complex of narrow lanes that contains several restored buildings and a few that are somewhat run down. Most of these brick-built buildings date back to the 19th century, even though the center of today's Old Town has existed since the 15th century. On the eastern shores of Hoan Kiem Lake, the Lake of the Returned Sword, a highly visible red wooden bridge leads to the Jade Mount Temple of Ngoc Song. This temple is devoted to various patrons of literature, medicine, plus a military general. The Long Bien Bridge is the city's lifeline and a reminder of Vietnam's military past. Originally built by the French, it spans the main tributary of the Red River and was frequently bombed during the Vietnam War. St. Joseph's Cathedral also dates back to French colonial times. The neo-Gothic building was completed in 1886, shortly after France further extended its influence in Southeast Asia. Thus, the cathedral symbolized its cultural triumph over Vietnam. But the French failed to detract from the significance of the country's many impressive temples and the traditional beliefs of the Vietnamese people. The Quan Tan Pagoda, that dates back to the 11th century, is still in use today. A 4-ton bronze statue that dates back to 1677 is the focal point of the sanctuary. The pagoda is located close to another artificially created but nevertheless popular location in Hanoi, the Truc Bac Lake. With its magnificent lakes and parks, the northern metropolis of Vietnam highlights its reputation as being an extremely pleasant city. Around 170 kilometers from the capital is one of Vietnam's most popular attractions. Here, nature has created a true wonder, and one that is extremely popular with tourists. Ha Long, the Bay of the Descending Dragon, has been well known for many years as a splendid island world with more than 1,600 limestone islands that rise from the waters of the Gulf of Tonkin. This bay was formed around 500 million years ago. And there's also an ancient legend that tells of the creation of these bizarre formations and their magical setting. It is said that Viet warriors were on the brink of losing a battle against a hostile people from the north, when a divine Jade Emperor sent a huge female dragon and one of her children to save the Viet soldiers. Pearls shot out from the mouths of the dragons and were transformed into tall rocks and islands within the ocean, into which the enemy ships crashed and sunk. Thus, the enemy was defeated. Local fishermen still tell of a legendary sea monster that occasionally appears and creates great turmoil. However, the existence of various ancient human settlements here is an actual fact. The oldest archaeological finds that have been discovered on the island date back more than 8,000 years. although it's believed that Ha Long Bay was populated far earlier than this. Consisting of sandstone and limestone, these islands are the natural habitat of various exotic species of plants that are unique to this area. Local fishermen still profit from the fertile waters of the Gulf of Tonkin. The biodiversity of these waters is truly impressive, as more than 1,000 species of fish live here. The island world in the Bay of Ha Long was formed by the remains of an ancient mountain range. When the Earth's crust gradually began to collapse, this area of karst mountains was flooded by the ocean, and they were transformed into small islands that today form one of the most beautiful landscapes in Asia. With its huge variety of natural towers and pinnacles, during the magical hours of sunset, this island is at its most captivating. When the sun slowly sets beyond the rocks in the Bay of Ha Long, it is easy to understand why the beauty of nature cannot be surpassed. The old imperial town of Hue was modelled on China's capital of Beijing. The citadel, a mighty fortification with several towers, surrounds the forbidden Purple City, to which public access was once prohibited. A total of 9 massive cannons symbolize the guardians of the past. Beyond the fortifications is the imperial administrative city, which at over 5 square kilometers is a town within a town. According to ancient records, the imperial area of Hue once consisted of 136 buildings. Many of its original rulers had exquisite taste, as can be seen by several of the buildings that have survived to the present day. The rapid rise of what had once been a rather unimportant town to a new and magnificent imperial city is indelibly associated with Vietnam's Nguyen royal family that was to influence the country for several centuries. At the end of the 17th century, the Nguyen transferred their political center to Hue. Almost 100 years later, the royal family was slaughtered, with the exception of 2 family members who managed to escape. In 1775, the city was conquered by a hostile army of the Trin people. But revenge came when the Nguyen ruler escaped from captivity and returned to help his people. Due to French support, Hue was recaptured in 1802. In subsequent years, the Nguyen built a new, larger, and even more beautiful palace in the city that had become both a residential and administrative center, Just outside the city, a total of 6 magnificent imperial tombs testify to the importance of Hue as a royal burial place. A short boat ride from the city centre on a hill above the Perfume River, the 21-metre-high Puoc Duyen Tower rises up into the sky. The tower, built during the rule of Emperor Tie Tri in 1844, is part of the Tien Mu Pagoda and is one of the city's main landmarks. It dates back to the 17th century, though several buildings have had to be restored due to a number of natural catastrophes. Unlike many historical sites in Vietnam, the pagoda remained undamaged by the Indochina War. The impressive Buddhist monastery is now occupied by monks. The vast tomb of the 4th Nguyen Emperor Tu Duc was built during his lifetime in 1864. Its picturesque and spacious riverbank location contains 50 buildings and provides a harmonious impression of the royal tomb. The imperial tombs of Hue were unaffected by the destruction of the Vietnam War during the 1960s and 70s. These buildings provide a comprehensive insight into the regal Vietnamese architecture of the 19th century. The richly detailed decoration of the buildings still highlights the quality of Vietnam's former craftsmen and artists. The tomb of Nguyen Emperor Tu Duc radiates a distinctive atmosphere of melancholy that has often been praised in numerous ancient Vietnamese songs and poems associated with Hue. The 4th Nguyen Emperor not only made history due to his impressive final resting place, Tu Duc was the last true emperor of Vietnam. It was during his rule that the country fell under increasing military threat from France. An awe-inspiring stairway flanked by dragons leads into the tomb of Khai Dinh, who until 1925 reigned over the Kingdom of Vietnam that had been transformed into a French colony. It is the last great tomb of the Nguyen dynasty. Along with his followers, Khai Dinh was given little respect when he collaborated with the French colonial rulers and exploited his own people. The subsequent communist leader of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, openly accused the former monarch Khai Dinh of being a mere puppet to the French. In payment for his loyalty to France, when he attained power in 1916, Emperor Khai Dinh led a life of supreme luxury, a life that proved to be short-lived as he became a drug addict and subsequently died from his habit. In this over-ornate tomb site, the lavish and extravagant wealth of the Nguyen ruler is very plain to see. At first glance, little remains of the former prosperity of the old trading city of Hoi An. 300 years ago, it possessed the most important port in Vietnam. Today, it's mainly local fishing boats that use the harbour. But even without its former international port, the city still has a special charm that continues to be influenced by local traditions. Situated in the harbour, the fish market and various other areas of Hoi An were neglected for many years until the arrival of Vietnam's tourist industry. Since the beginning of the 1990s, the city's picturesque old town has become increasingly popular. The quiet and contemplative atmosphere of its streets and alleys has remained unchanged during its gradual development. Both architecturally and culturally, Hoi An has been influenced by two countries, China and Japan. The influence of the Chinese is clearly visible even today. They bequeathed a large number of magnificent buildings such as temples and meeting halls. At the end of the 17th century, an increasing number of merchants from China settled here as this harbour city became increasingly successful with the great European trading nations of that time, such as Portugal, Spain and the Netherlands. But it was the Chinese and their 5 mighty family tribes who most influenced the city's trade and everyday life. The Guangdong Temple was once frequented by Chinese merchants and sailors. As with the Hoan Kiem Pagoda, the Guangdong Temple was dedicated to the patron saint of sailors, Tian Hao, who played an important role in the lives of the people of Hoi An. Virtually everywhere, the city's spiritual and cultural association with the sea, which assisted both its prosperity and influence, is plain to see. Be it in the temples, streets or markets, most visitors to the city of Hoi An associate it with the atmosphere of the 19th century. The daily life in the harbour area is particularly evocative of that time. Arts and crafts have also enjoyed a long tradition here. These wood carvings are particularly eye-catching. In numerous small workshops, little has changed during the past 150 years, and even today, many of the working techniques are somewhat archaic. When in the 17th century the city had developed into a centre of international trade, the influence of its Japanese merchants began to decrease. Responsible for this development was the former Japanese emperor, who forbade his people, thus the merchants of Hoi An, any contact with foreigners. Trade was severely curtailed. In the middle of the 17th century, almost all of the Japanese traders had left the town. Their stately homes remained and were used by subsequent merchants when the city's economy gradually began to re-establish itself. One of the most beautiful legacies of the Japanese is the famous enclosed Hoi An Bridge. It once linked the Japanese district with the Chinese part of town. One of the city's most popular tourist attractions is the residence of Peng Hung, a trading house that has been occupied by 8 generations of a single family. Its splendid and captivating decor combines several elements of Asian architecture. Chinese, Vietnamese and Japanese designs are to be found in almost all of the city's buildings, but are combined here in a particularly harmonious way. Not all of Hoi An's buildings are in as good condition as the House of Peng Hung. Nevertheless, in recent years, much has been done to revive the architectural splendor of this former trading city. As with the city's prosperity, the fall of Hoi An was also linked to its harbor. When in the 19th century ships were built increasingly larger and the Tu Bon River began to silt up, the city began to lose its international importance. More than 100 years after the decline of the city, today the situation is improving once again. Thanks to its historical atmosphere, Hoi An may soon enter a new period of prosperity. Situated on the estuary of the Song Kai, Nha Trang is an extraordinarily beautiful city that has a relatively long history of tourism. The French also appreciated its splendor and built several magnificent and elegant mansions here in the 1920s. But it also boasts many cultural attractions, as Nha Trang once formed part of the legendary kingdom of Champa. The Cham Pagoda of Po Nagar is one of the most impressive examples of this epoch. It is still worshipped in today. The striking sanctuary of Po Nagar is located on a hill just outside Nha Trang and is dedicated to the patron and divine mother of the Cham. It is believed that this was also the site of a small wooden temple in the 2nd century AD. In subsequent years, a wooden temple was replaced by various stone buildings. The temple's 23-meter-high northern tower has been well preserved. It's one of the most beautiful examples of Cham architecture. Southwest of Po Nagar, on the opposite shore of a lake, is the Jua Long Son Monastery with its impressive Buddha statue that was erected in 1963. During the 8-year reign of the first president of South Vietnam, the dictator Ngo Dinh Diem, numerous Buddhists were imprisoned and some were even executed. However, a military coup put an end to the infamous career of Diem and also cost him his life, while marking an end to the persecution of the Buddhists. Following the increasing influence of the Americans on South Vietnam, the city of Nha Trang further expanded its position as a popular beach resort. Its population also increased rapidly and grew from 50,000 to more than 250,000. Numerous nightclubs and discos transformed the city into a mini Miami. Today, life here has returned to normal. Between Nha Trang and Saigon is one of the finest cultural landmarks in South Vietnam. On top of a 100-meter hill rise the proud brick towers of the Cham sanctuary of Po Klun Garai. This impressive temple site is still visited and worshipped throughout the year by the local Cham population, particularly on 4 religious holidays. This important sanctuary is dedicated to the legendary and divine Cham king Po Klun Garai. The Cham people's close cultural relationship with India is highlighted by the unique artistic decoration of the temple. King Po Klun Garai has been portrayed as a Mukha Lingam, a phallic symbol that originated in India and was once common in this southern region of Vietnam. In addition to other sections of this fascinating sanctuary are clear signs of Indian influence within the Cham architecture. The vestibule of the large main temple of Po Klun Garai features a sculpture of a dancing Shiva, an important Hindu deity. In Da Lat, the capital of the province of Lam Dong, a modern stately building is a reminder of the reign of the 13th emperor of the Nguyen dynasty, Bao Dai, who wrote an historical account of his life as the last of Vietnam's emperors. Surrounded by a splendid and well laid out park, the summer palace of Bao Dai has become one of the most popular attractions in Da Lat. It was not only the emperor who recognized the advantages of this city of eternal spring. Homesick French colonialists also began to appreciate Da Lat for its mild climate, especially during the hot and humid summer months. The summer palace of Bao Dai was built in 1933 and contains 25 rooms and many valuable furnishings, antiques and personal belongings of the emperor. The elegant furnishings within his residence indicate the splendor with which the last Vietnamese emperor surrounded himself. With a population of around 130,000, the small town of Da Lat has prospered due to its tourist industry. Da Lat is particularly popular with honeymooners. The city's many atmospheric and romantic attractions, such as the Valley of Love and the Lake of Sorrow, are especially popular. With its special dreamy atmosphere, Da Lat appeals to both foreign as well as local visitors. On the western shores of the Saigon River, that early in the morning is a popular meeting place for Tai Chi, is Ho Chi Minh City, the former capital of Saigon. This, the largest and most populated city in Vietnam, has around 6 million inhabitants. A fact well substantiated by the exceptionally busy streets of this southern metropolis. Under the colonial reign of the French, who conquered Saigon in 1861, the city became an important center of administration. Built in 1911, the Opera House is one of the city's most striking buildings and dates back to French colonial times. The city is closely associated with Vietnam's national hero, Ho Chi Minh, who is still referred to here as Uncle Ho. The renaming of Saigon to Ho Chi Minh City is a controversial subject in the former capital of South Vietnam, because many still use its original name. South Vietnam's former residential palace has also been renamed. It's now called the Palace of Reunification. The palace's underground bunker is open to the public. Here, equipment once used by the American military, such as these deciphering machines, are exhibited. The Saigon Museum does not feature the country's most recent political and military history, but the artistic and cultural development of Vietnam. Its exhibits range from the earliest prehistoric epochs right up to the Nguyen dynasty and into the 1930s. When today's Saigon was founded, the south of the country was not ruled by the Vietnamese, but was part of the Khmer kingdom of Angkor. Over the years, Malay, Indian and Chinese traders settled in the city and created their own religious monuments and cult sites. The city was soon transformed into an important trading center of the Mekong Delta. The name Saigon only dates back to the end of the 17th century, when the Vietnamese began to develop the city still further. Today, Saigon boasts the largest and economically most important harbor in Vietnam. The Notre Dame Cathedral dates back to the time of French occupation that turned this metropolis into the capital of their colonial empire in Indochina. The construction of the cathedral, that was completed in around 1883, was a costly affair, as its building materials were specially imported from Marseille. The Hindu temple of Sri Mariamman is in beautiful and atmospheric contrast to the cathedral. Even though the majority of the Indian population left the city after the reunification of Vietnam in 1976, this temple is still in use today. With more than 500,000 ethnic Chinese, today's Chinese district is particularly densely populated. Jolon, the Great Market, justifies its name as this district is the busiest in the city. Up until the beginning of the 20th century, Jolon had the dubious reputation of being an evil and depraved area of drugs and prostitution. The Tien Hao Pagoda is one of the most visited temples in Jolon. It is dedicated to the famous Chinese goddess of the ocean, who is able to cross the ocean on a mat and travel everywhere upon a cloud. For a small donation, the faithful receive a spiral coil of incense, hundreds of which create a special atmosphere within the pagoda. In contrast, the War Museum invokes darker feelings. It is a reminder of the horrors of the 9-year-long Vietnam War. Its collection of war trophies such as American helicopters and tactical aircraft, as well as a huge photo gallery, evoke a depressing and unsettling feeling within all those who come here. Far more serene is the atmosphere contained within the Jack Lam Pagoda, the oldest temple site in Saigon that dates back to 1744. Despite its central city location, it has managed to preserve its reverent tranquility. As night sets in, the city is transformed. For those who wish to escape the hectic nightlife of Saigon, it also has many cultural attractions. Dance performances feature the captivating grace of one of Vietnam's age-old and popular cultures, as well as the fascinating sound of its traditional music. Folk dance has always played an important role in the lives of the Vietnamese. Each Vietnamese nationality possesses its own unique dances. The vast delta of the mighty Mekong River is one of the most unique natural habitats in Southeast Asia. Its size alone is overwhelming. The Mekong's complex system of canals covers an area of more than 39,000 square kilometers. This brown-colored river is a huge natural habitat and mainly untouched wilderness. And it has now been discovered that the Mekong Delta has been inhabited by man since time immemorial. Its fertile soil not only attracted settlers, but also promoted the development of the early kingdom of Funan, that, during the 1st and 6th centuries AD, caught the attention of its far larger neighbor, China. Agriculture has always been very important in this region. The fertile soil contained on the many river islands of the delta has been worked for several centuries by the region's farmers. Fishing is the second largest occupation in the delta. Its rivers contain an abundance of fish. Thus, small fishing boats are a common sight here, although the local fishermen make little money and often struggle to survive. sight of dark storm clouds is also common when traveling along the canals of the Mekong Delta. The inhabitants of the delta don't appear to notice the heavy but mostly short tropical downpours. The hot and humid climate is ideal for the local agriculture, and the rain usually stops as fast as it has begun. Up until the middle of the 20th century, a major part of the delta was only sparsely populated. But the increasing industrialization of Vietnam also brought with it many changes. Man began to conquer new territories and to establish further settlements. In the numerous tributaries and smaller offshoots of the Cuu Long, as the Mekong is referred to by the Vietnamese, visitors often experience a sense of timelessness. In the center of the delta, an architectural relic of colonial times suddenly appears. A 19th century Catholic church, built by the French. The Mekong witnessed many hostilities during the Vietnam War of the 1960s and 70s, when its maze-like waterways and tributaries became the scene of many a bloody battle between the Americans and the Viet Cong. However, nature has since healed the wounds of this terrible conflict. The people of the Delta can now go about their work in peace. At the central crossing of 7 great canals is the city of Pang Hiep, a veritable magnet for local farmers, fishermen, and also an attraction for many excursion boats and tourists from all over the world. The river becomes increasingly lively as we approach our destination. Boats appear from every direction. The reason for this amount of waterway traffic is the floating markets of Pang Hiep that attract hordes of tourists and have become increasingly well known not only in Vietnam, but also throughout the world. The floating markets are a celebration of the senses. It's not surprising that this colorful attraction has become one of the most photographed locations in Vietnam. Up until quite recently, markets like this were far from unusual. However, the floating market of Pang Hiep is one of the last of its kind. This traditional market is most certainly well worth a visit and hopefully will survive for many more years to come. Vietnam is now going through a time of change. Its communist economy has already plunged it into deep crisis. But due to recent economic reforms, it's begun to grow from strength to strength. It is not only major investors who've become increasingly interested in the financial opportunities offered by this remarkable country in Southeast Asia. Those from abroad are also enchanted by its wealth of cultural and scenic treasures. Vietnam has finally opened up its doors. Its people are both amicable and extremely hospitable. And now it's surely time that they deserve to see their land of the rising dragon enjoy a further epoch of peace and prosperity.